All right, let's get started. We're honored to have lead these discussions licensed attorney and professional fiduciary, Darby Jones. Darby's a member of the Florida and Maryland Bar. She serves on the executive council of the Real Property Probate Trust Law section of the Florida Bar and is a registered professional guardian. Darby is also the founder and executive director of the Professional Fiduciary Council of Florida. Today's Aging Academy dilemma: my parents are refusing help. Darby's going to help us gain some insight on the issues that can arise when you're trying to help manage the care of someone who doesn't really want your help, and tips on how to manage the situation. Darby, what do we do if mom or dad keeps tossing out the home health helper?
Oh gosh, that never happens, does it? Well, I'm sure that many of you who have tuned in today may be familiar with this situation or may be worrying about being faced with this situation in the near future. So today, we're going to have some great answers for you. It can be very overwhelming and very stressful and very scary when you're all of a sudden faced with having to take care of a loved one, whether it's a spouse, parent, child, friend, and you don't really know where to go to get help, and you struggle with it on your own. But today we are going to give you some very valuable information. It's also hard for people if, for example, you're still working or you live a long distance away or you have your own family to be worrying about, and to be able to take the time and the effort and the energy it takes to now care for someone else who might need some significant care. It's difficult. Hopefully today you're going to leave with a sense of peace, clarity, and how to manage this role if you're not already in it, or if you soon to be faced with this role. As a professional fiduciary, I deal often in the situation of being responsible for people's care, either through a power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, or trust. I don't know how I could do my job without the help of others. And today we're going to speak about that specific other that I use in almost every situation I have. And those are certified care managers. People are reluctant to accept help, especially women, because we think we're the caregivers all along. So it's hard for us to, when the day comes, to really accept help. And it can be a struggle to get the people and services in place that are really necessary. But today we're going to help you with that. I have a special guest. And in every episode, I think probably Luann or Chandra, Michelle, I think in every episode, I talk about the value and the need for bringing a certified care manager into the mix. So today we have with us a certified care manager who's going to help us walk through many situations and how and when and why you want to know what they do and how to find one. So please let me introduce you, Luann Da Silva. She's here today, and I'm going to let her introduce herself, and we're going to get right to it. Thanks, Luann.
Hi, thank you, Darby. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Luann, as Darby said. I'm a care manager in South Florida. And care management, people don't know that we exist. They don't know who we are. They don't know what we do. And in general, I kind of describe myself as a daughter who's educated in everything aging. Is kind of a good way to describe it. But in essence, we guide and we advocate for people to help. And I say people, the elder person themselves and the family, as to what to do in a myriad of situations. So in general, though, if you had a description of an aging life care manager, or some people call us a geriatric care manager, and some people just say care manager, and as Darby said, certified, is a health and human services professional that helps to guide an older person and their family in the aging process and helps to navigate, because it's very difficult, as I'm sure many of you have already learned, either in your own circumstance or caring for loved ones, that you've seen that it is difficult. There's so much going on. And our big thing as care managers is to improve the quality of life for the person that we're serving, and to improve the quality of life for their family. most importantly, peace of mind. Most often in my situation, I am working with people whose family lives maybe 2,000 miles away. I have clients whose family lives in California, in Canada, in the Northeast, in the Midwest, and I'm in Florida, and their loved ones are in Florida. So that's it's really important to me as just to bring peace of mind to the family, because my parents live in Wisconsin. So this is actually really why I went into the profession, because I would call to get an update on my parents. Even from my own siblings, I couldn't get a decent answer, frankly. So I said, you know what? I learned about care managers, and so that's what I wanted to move into. I just want to tell you a little bit how we actually do it. So if somebody came to us and wanted to engage our services, we work either in a person's private home or in a nursing home or in assisted living or wherever the person's living. So the family calls us, they talk to me about the problems they're having, and we will get to the whole topic of this particular discussion about the dad or mom kicking the home health aides out. So that we get, believe me, we get that call. So once we get the call and they talk to us, tell us what their needs are, and then we go out. And again, with my company, I like to give them a gratis visit if that's what they want, because this is a very intimate situation. They're bringing us into their home. They're entrusting us with their parents, typically their parents, or their aunt or their uncle or their sister or whomever it may be. So I go and meet with them, let them know who I am. And then if they engage our services, the first step is to do an assessment. So we assess these different areas, which I'll go over briefly. We'll go over more specifically later. The biggest area is medical. What's going on with the person medically? What are their diagnoses? What kind of medications are they on? What are their current medical issues? So medical is huge. The next area that we assess is called ADLs, or activities of daily living. There's two activities of daily living. There's the one that's out in the community. Can they go grocery shopping? Do they drive? Can they pay their bills? Can they manage their mail? And then there's what's called basic activities of daily living. They're bathing, they're dressing, toileting, feeding themselves. Those are the basics. Then we look at environment and safety. Very important to me. Environment and safety. Are they in a safe environment? We do home assessments. I didn't even kind of tell you, I'm an occupational therapist by trade. People who do care management, most of the people I meet are nurses or social workers. There's also therapists, psychologists, gerontologists. There's licensed clinical social workers. There's different people that go into this profession. Like I said, I'm an occupational therapist. So are the folks that work with me. So environment and safety. The next two areas, legal and financial. Legal, again, we'll go into these more in depth later in our conversation, but those are things we touch on as care managers to make sure they're being addressed. That's not our expertise, but we make sure they're being addressed by the appropriate experts. Next one is psychosocial. Psychosocial is where we look, like for example, the example we're working with is somebody is kicking someone out of their house. Those are some behaviors. So we look at the behaviors a person is having. How can we address that? And then socially, do they have friends? Do they have family support? Do they belong to an organization? Those things are important. And then the last area that we look at when we're doing the assessment, and I know this seems like a lot. It's like, that's a lot.
It is a lot.
It's a lot. But when we go, we're probably on our first visit, we're probably with them in like an hour and a half of physically with them. And then a lot of this is follow up afterwards, getting documentation from their doctors and from the hospital and that kind of thing. But the last thing I look at is I shouldn't say it's the last thing, because I'm looking at it the whole time I'm in assessing the person, is I'm looking at their cognition. But as far as a formal cognitive assessment, I hold off on that until I know the person is accepting of me and accepting of that. It may never happen, but if it's needed, and I'll do that. And basically what I do for that is a standardized test, which is called the SLUMS, which is a St. Louis University mental status exam, which I do, and that will give me a baseline as to where this person is cognitively.
Now, is that what people hear often as a mini mental? Is that what that
It's a different exam. There's a mini mental, which honestly, they're starting to get away from the mini mental. It was like the be all end all, but they're starting to see that it has some flaws. They use the slums, they use the mini mental still. There's one called the BCRS, there's one called the FAST, there's different standardized tests too. And this is just a small test. And then if we found out there was cognitive a situation, then we could potentially go to a neurologist, which comes to my next point. After we've done that assessment of all those areas, we develop a plan of care, which basically says what's priority for this person. And it's not, we don't decide. We decide from our professional standpoint. We also bring in the information from the client, what is their goal, and the family, what is their goal. It's because they're in charge. We're there to assist and serve. So what are their goals and how can we bring it all together?
So
So
Chandra, I think, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead. So that's basically just saying that's a client-centered plan of care. And then that is like our jumping board, so to speak, to move forward with services.
Now, to get to that jumping board, I think it would be helpful for our audience if we brought up, Chandra, if you could bring up the Aging Life Care Association website, just so we can show everybody how really easy it is to find somebody, or not easy, but hopefully easy to find somebody. So Luann, walk us through, let's pretend that I'm looking for someone and let's see how we find you.
Okay, so first thing I want to say though, because I neglected to mention, so this website, this is the gold standard for finding a care manager. People can quote unquote hang their shingle and say they're a care manager, but like I said, this is the gold standard. You can only belong to this organization. You follow their ethics and so forth, and also you can become certified, which I'll talk more about. So you go to the orange button that says find an aging life care expert, and you click on that. And then you scroll down. I want to stop here and show you something. You see where it says to search by zip code, use the first tab and then look up zip code here. No, up above. A lot of people get mixed up and they go there. That is actually to find a zip code if you don't know the zip code, but we don't want to go there. But I just want to show that to people because a lot of people go there by mistake. Scroll down further where it actually says zip code. If you put in 33441, please. And then you just hit find. It's that simple. I have it's a set for a 25-mile distance around you. So we can stop here and I'll show you. So Stephanie comes up first. And we all know each other because we belong to a national association, and then we have chapters throughout the country. Stephanie is, you see where it says Fellow of the Leadership Academy? She's an advanced professional that has met the fellow standard. So all your fellows will come up first. Fellows are folks who've had at least 10 years experience as an advanced professional. They've been certified for at least 6 of those years, and they've been involved in the national or their state associations in some kind of a role. And she's actually done quite a lot. So Stephanie the fellows will always come up first. We're going back in. And then you'll see, because that's my zip code, then I come up next. And that is because I'm the closest one. So you would put in the zip code for your loved one of where they are, not where you are, but where they are, of course. And then you can see there's a little synopsis of what we do or the areas that we cover. Another thing I like to look at is if you see member since, how long has the person been a member of the association? What chapter are they in? And then there's typically a link to the person's website.
And also, again, I hate interrupting, but I just,
No, go right ahead.
Another thing, when I'm utilizing this, when I have a client, or let's say I have a new client, or I've had a client for a long time, and I just want a refresher on that person's care and status, I absolutely come here and then I try to match the credentials to what issues my client may or may not have. So for example, I may have a client who has more chronic medical conditions that are complicated and something that I'm not necessarily familiar with. Or I might have someone who's got the behavioral problems, the man throwing the caregivers out. So I will come here and I will look, for example, Luann's credentials there versus, let's say, the lady right below Monique, she's got more the nursing background, correct? Am I right?
Yes.
Just put the credentials behind the name,
Mhm.
the BSN, MSN, RN. Can you just explain for a minute some of what those, yours and this person's credentials mean?
Sure,
Just so we
sure.
understand.
So, obviously OTR, I'm occupational therapist. The BS is a Bachelor of Science. If the people put their that information in there, the OTR as occupational therapist, CCM is a certified case manager.
Okay.
So there's a if you see below me, Monique is a CMC, which is care manager certified. There's 3 certifying bodies that ALCA, this website, Aging Life Care, ALCA recognizes 3 certifying bodies in order for your certification in order to be an advanced professional. So the certifying body for me is a certified case manager. The certifying body for Monique is case manager certified. It's really kind of splitting hairs, I should say. For mine, you needed to be like a nurse, which is funny because Monique is a nurse, so she could be a CCM. I could be a CMC. It just is determining which body you wanted to go through. And when you say certified, what happened is I was an occupational therapist for many years, and I'm licensed as an occupational therapist. When you get certified as a case manager, you have to sit for a national exam. So you sit and you take a national exam, and then you're certified. I'm certified nationally. So that's what these are. And the third certifying body that I haven't mentioned yet is the National Association of Social Workers. So a person could also get certified under the National Association of Social Workers. And then once you're certified, you can come in here and become a member of the Aging Life Care at the advanced professional level.
And
You
so
could also-
Monique, those, the MSN, RN and BSN, what do those mean?
A Bachelor of Nursing, a Master's of Nursing, and then registered nurse.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Now, don't quiz me on all these, Darby. I don't know if I can answer them all.
Well, just
I can do
for,
my best.
for people in the audience, just, you know, if you're
Yes,
trying to
absolutely.
find- if you have
But
medical.
here's a new one. So under Sherry, you see MSW, that's a Master of Social Work.
Okay.
So I will say I am a member of the Florida chapter, so I know most all of these people because we go to meetings together all the time.
Mhm.
And I would say most of the care managers you meet are either social workers or nurses. There are the occupational therapists and some physical therapists are just starting to come more into the
Wait,
profession.
stop, Chandra. What is RPH?
Where do you see that? Oh, right there. Respiratory therapist, maybe? No, I don't, honestly, I don't know. And
Huh.
she's new, to be honest. She must be, well, it's 2015. She hasn't been at the advanced professional level before because I haven't seen her name before.
Well,
But yeah.
anyway, this is super helpful. I hope everybody has an idea. I go to this website on a very regular basis to identify and locate certified, and that's the key. There are a lot of people out there that can put websites on the internet that look and smell very official. But you really, if I can't impress this enough today, if there's one thing I want you to go away with is you need to find a certified care manager.
And I just want to, I'm sorry, Darby, but I just want to interject before we, most of these care managers, if not all of them, will speak to you gratis for at least a half an hour, if not more, to answer some questions for you. And you can kind of get a feel, you know, if you're trying to decide between 2 or 3 that are in your area, you can call and get a feel and talk to them and help to make your decision.
Okay, well, thank you, Susie and Deborah. It's a registered pharmacist.
I saw that pop up. That's good. Okay.
Okay, I want to go back and let's go through the 8 knowledge areas that you first mentioned when you were introducing the services that care managers can
Okay.
provide.
Mhm.
And let's just dig a little deeper in each one, not super
Okay.
deep, but just want to overview and kind of share some of the stories that I've had in each one of those categories and that you've had too, I'm sure.
Mhm.
The first one I think is health and disability. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so the health and disability, when I first introduced it, it was, I talked to medical. So that's basically what that's about. And it's about a person's their physical health, their mental health, and their cognitive or dementia, if they have any dementias.
Mhm.
So what we really do in that area, besides the fact that we obviously look at a person's medication management, how are they managing their medication? We look at their diagnoses. Those two go so hand in hand. If you see that they're on a blood pressure med, then they're hypertensive. So we look at that information and we determined what the needs are. So many of our clients need med management. They don't want it, but they need it.
One of the most common readmissions to hospital. You know, if you're discharged from a hospital and now you've got a whole new regime of medications, one of the most common readmissions reasons is for lack of med management.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have people pinging and ponging out of the hospital, and once they finally agree to medication management, it's huge. Because you know what, it is hard to remember if you took your meds, and they not only don't remember them, but they get them all mixed up. And so that'll parlay into the fact that we go to doctor's appointments with our clients. That's probably, gosh, I would say 60, maybe 70% of our day-to-day with our clients is going to doctor's appointments and to the hospital and to the emergency rooms and wherever they need to go for their medical care, and making sure that that information, first and foremost, the right questions are asked, the right information is brought to the doctor, that information is then parlayed to the right providers so that the plan of care is carried out.
Now, let me
Doctors
interject here.
Yes.
Don't forget, everybody out there, our last episode, or the one before that, last one was getting rid of the clutter and the junk, but the one before that, mom broke her hip, went to the hospital. If you watch that episode, you'll recall that we talked very much about how a certified care manager, in conjunction with a caregiver, with the hospital visit, will coordinate all of these issues that may be over your head, or you're not hearing them, the doctor is not helping you understand. It is critical to involve a care manager with these sort of complicated medical interactions. And another thing I want to say is, another thing I use certified care managers for is to do kind of a one-off, one-time assessment. Again, I get new clients frequently, and even though they may not have a super complicated situation, I'm still new. I'm new there. I don't know the family. I don't know the dynamics. I don't know the situation, the housing, any of that. Certainly not their cognitive or medical conditions. So oftentimes I will initially hire a certified care manager to do an assessment. And that means going through all of these areas and filling a report for me. And then that provides me a really nice kind of a holistic care plan for me to follow. And I may not need the care management services forever or ongoing, depending on what that report brings back. But it will show me how many hours of caregivers does that care manager suggest we put in place. You know, what medical conditions are really in play. How cognitive did they feel the client really was? What are some of the risks of maybe the neighbors or family members, or some of the dynamics that I need to be aware of? So don't think that if you hire a certified care manager that it's some sort of a permanent fixture. You can use a care manager as a really good initial tool just to sort of get a landscape of what's going on. And very often, if I have a client for many, many, many years, I will do this somewhat regularly, once a year, once every quarter, just to make sure I'm doing my due diligence and having the right schedule of caregiving, because people decline or change over the years. So what you might be putting in place today could be very different a year or two from today. So sorry for the interruption, but I just wanted.
That's okay. No worries. So just back to when we go to the doctor's appointment, what comes out of that? We want to make sure that all the providers know. And that might sound simple. It's not simple. A medication change was put into place. Does the nurse who's filling the med box, does she know? Does the caregiver know? We communicate like crazy communication with families. Some families want every bit of nuance communicated, and we send emails. Some families just want it, we do it once a week, but then we communicate all of these needs. And then going back to what Darby was mentioning with the hospitalization, at that point, when someone's hospitalized, I feel it's important that we communicate very intimately, so we're texting at that point. Because otherwise my communication is phone calls or emails, but when they're in the hospital, myself and my care managers, we text, and because they want to know now, how's mom, how's dad? We go to the hospital, and we're actually getting into crisis intervention, but that's okay. We go to the hospital and we are there right away when they're first admitted, and then we go back periodically and or call on the phone. Because a family member, unless they're in healthcare, they're not getting the right information on the phone. They're not even speaking to the right person. And then we're also there when the time comes to get the, to eventually help also in the discharge or stop the discharge. Because sometimes the doctor is saying, oh, they're ready to go. And we're like, no, they're not.
Not on a weekend. Don't get discharged on a weekend.
Not on a
ever.
weekend. And we didn't get a hemoglobin. And the hemoglobin had dropped. And what are you doing about the dropping hemoglobin? And where are we going to go from here? And then they'll hold discharges. The key word is safe. It's not a safe discharge.
Exactly. That
And
is
which
a very good point. And again, we
Yeah.
talked about that with the episode with
Okay.
the broken hip. Okay, the financial, let's just touch on that briefly.
Sure. So financial, basically, that's something I look at, is just to make sure the person, I have a client right now, we were called in primarily because her cell phone was turned off because she didn't pay her bills. So she doesn't remember she didn't pay her bill. So in any case, we get pulled in sometimes for financial reasons. And I need to know two things: who's managing the finances, because sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. And the second thing, as I get to know the person, I do talk with the family about kind of how much money they have left. I don't need to know real specifics, but I need them to know resources for potential asset protection and potential Medicaid, so I can put them in touch with the right person, that to even let them know that it's out there, kind of thing. So that's with financial. And that also kind of pulls in legal.
Well, and we'll get
Yeah.
to the legal in a minute, but and when we get to the legal part, I'll give you guys some resources about how and who to pull in when these situations arise. But I also want to emphasize what Luann said, is who is handling the finances, who's ultimately responsible to write those checks. That is so important. And if you recall, my very first episode on Aging Academy was about fiduciary responsibilities and who have you got named as your fiduciaries. And that one document in your estate plan that, to my opinion, is the most important document is that power of attorney and who you have named. And hopefully you have named more than one person. So if that person isn't available, there is a successor, or if that person is unable or unwilling or unfit to serve, you've got a successor. So remember, power of attorney is super important.
And if I may interject, you also want someone who's younger than you. So many times I meet clients and they name the power of attorney as the same age as they are, and now they've fallen ill and they can't. So we need to redo their power of attorney documents because they're not available.
Well, and they may not have anyone. And that's one of the primary reasons that we here in Florida have the Professional Fiduciary Council of Florida, which is a pool of vetted, insured, trusted professionals to be able to serve in those categories. California also has a huge professional fiduciary association, as does Arizona, I believe. So yeah, it's a real struggle to find, if you don't have someone, perhaps the attorney that's helping you with those documents might be able to locate an appropriate power of attorney for you. So start housing.
Yes. So in housing, we're, like I said earlier, looking at the safety of the situation, but also looking at where do they want to live and where does the family want them to live? And we help in actually making that happen. If someone, I had a circumstance where I had a client living here in Boca. Her daughter lived in California, and the daughter was exceedingly worried about her. And we eventually got her to move to California, which was a big deal because she didn't want to move there. But then the more we talked about it, she did want to move. She was just afraid she couldn't do it because she had this big house, and how is she going to move at her age? And we bring in resources. We bring in not just moving companies, but companies that are designed to move seniors.
Senior move managers.
Yes.
Our last episode was about all the clutter in your house, how to move,
Mhm.
how to downsize, how to age in place, how to modify your home, how to determine what facilities might be best for you or not. And that's where the senior move managers, again, a national association, they're certified, they're vetted, they're very aware of specifically senior situations.
Yes.
So don't
Mhm.
forget those senior move managers can help tremendously.
And if sometimes families elect and the person elects to stay at home, even though they could even qualify or benefit from, let's say, an assisted living or a nursing home, then it's our job to work with the family to make it possible for them to stay at home. You know, get the caregivers in, get the med management in, that kind of thing.
Well, I'm a huge proponent of staying home, and a facility might be the right choice for some people, but don't feel like that's your only option is to put mom in a facility, because it isn't. And in my humble opinion, I would prefer to keep people at home as long as you possibly can, whether that's economically or physically. And home doesn't have to be that home, but it could be a downsized home, a condo or a small villa where they're still able to be given private care, one-on-one care, one-on-one supervision, private duty nurses, care management, which is, in my opinion, the ideal route to take if it's at all possible.
And I will say that, and that's true, everybody wants to stay home. I will add to that, people stay home sometimes and they're lonely. So the isolation of staying at home sometimes, especially for women, men and maybe is not as much, but women in particular, they tend to thrive when they go, it's their own home, like an independent apartment, but within a CCRC. That's a whole nother story, but that they tend to then have friends and have time to meet people, and because I sometimes see people get lonely at home, but all those discussions can come about and decisions can be made, again, client-centered.
Exactly. And there's some really good adult day programs that the
Mhm.
caregivers could take them to put in socialization aspects and so forth without having to uproot to a facility.
Mhm.
Families, oh my gosh. Okay, this is always can be the most challenging aspect, in my opinion. Again, serving as a professional fiduciary, I'm often kind of placed into a family out of nowhere. So sometimes it's hard for me to assess, which family member is telling the truth and which family member is really the one that's being abused or neglected or taking advantage. And again, I have to remind everybody that I'm usually involved when there's a problem. Okay, if we have the Leave It to Beaver family out there, you're not going to need a professional fiduciary like me. But so, pardon me if I seem a little salty and cynical, but those are just the situations where we're asked to come in and help. So the family dynamics is where I really like having a certified care manager, because if I have a client who's in a home who, for example, is refusing to let the caregiver in and is acting belligerent or has horrible caregivers in the house who likely are taking advantage or not caring for the person at all, and I need to come in and clearly make some big changes, I don't want the family members or the other people who are involved, or whether they're family or not, to criticize my decision or have any reason to doubt what I'm doing is correct. So that's when the care manager will come in and write that assessment and say, hey, we need a better caregiver schedule in place. We need to get them a new wheelchair. We've got to get some modifications in the home. We've got to do these things. And then that way, when the family members or whoever it is that isn't trusting what I'm doing or doesn't want me involved, I can show them that report. And I've got a third party verification right there saying, well, it's not me. Look, the care manager is saying this is what we need to put in place. So that could be a huge tool if you ever have acrimony or people that may not be trusting or have confidence in the decisions that you're making.
And for me, under the as I said in the beginning, is peace of mind. I don't have I do have clients that, or I should say families that there's a little bit of fighting, if that's the right word. But mostly I'm very fortunate. The clients that have come forth and are working with me, they tend to be getting along well, and they're working together for the benefit of their mom or dad. And just like a current story or a current situation we have is that he's an only child, and he's younger. So he's not your typical like older person who has a 90-year-old parent. He was had later in life. So he's a younger person himself, and he's raising small children. So he's in the process of raising children. He doesn't live here. He lives up in the Northeast, and we have his mom and dad. And what do they do? What does he do with the situation? Where do they live? They're not safe where they currently live. We've helped to transition them to an assisted living, and then unfortunately, because they hold hands everywhere they go, because they've been married forever. So the one fell and the other one fell because they were holding hands. So now we're transitioning them to a nursing home, and helping the son every step of the way. He simply cannot do it. I mean, he's raising 2 children, and he lives thousands of miles away. So,
Local resources.
so local resources.
Yeah.
Families look to us for referrals from soup to nuts. And literally, we refer for caregivers. We refer for the daily money managers, which we just talked about with finances. We refer for transportation resources. We refer for doctors, all the different types of doctors. People be looking for a neurologist, and they look to us to make those recommendations, which we do, of course. Kind of you name it, we refer to it. The moving companies, and families really, really trust us because they've come to trust us with their parents. They're certainly going to trust us in that regard. I do like to give the family choices. Especially when it comes to caregivers. And I know, Darby, you and I touched a little bit on that. There's agencies, there's registries, and there's private duties. Families don't know that when they come to us. They don't know that there's all those differences. So I explain to them what that's all about, and kind of help them make a decision in that regard. I don't know.
It is really important to get as much advice as you can before you hire caregivers. So just for a minute, Luann, explain to people what the difference is between a caregiver and a care manager.
Okay, so a caregiver is like a CNA, which is a certified nursing assistant, or an HHA, which is a home health aide, or PDA, which is a private duty assistant, which they could be certified or not. We also have what's called companions. In the state of Florida, companions can work with an older person, but they can't touch them. So if the person actually needs physical assistance, it has to be either a CNA or an HHA. If somebody wants to go with somebody private, all those rules are thrown out the window because they're hiring them privately, and there's no kind of regulation per se. And
now let me chime in here real quickly.
Sure.
When you say privately, what that means is you're not going through an agency, so to speak. You're hiring the friend down the street, a friend from church's daughter. In other words, you haven't gone to a regular company.
Right.
It's still private pay, even if you go to a company or an agency. Caregiving is generally private pay. And while we're on that, we've had the question about cost. In a minute, I'm going to ask you, Luann, to kind of tell us how much it costs for these services from a certified care manager.
Sure.
But from a caregiver standpoint, I want to just hammer this point home to everybody out there. If you are hiring or need a caregiver, someone, not the level of a care manager yet, please be careful who you hire, and don't try to be overly concerned about the expense per hour. Because at the end of the day, if you try to cut corners there, hire the friend, hire someone down the street, hire the daughter of somebody you work with, it's going to backfire. Very often they don't have insurance. There's not been any background check. You don't even know if they have a valid driver's license. If you're not paying their insurance and Social Security, you may get sued later for not filing the appropriate income taxes or payroll taxes that would have been required for that caregiver. So be very careful if you're going down that road. And that's my professional opinion. And don't go to a registry. And it's hard to know from the advertisements on TV whether they're a registry or not. So make sure when you're talking to that caregiver company, ask them if the caregivers are actual employees of that agency, not just like Kelly Girl some kind of course, hopefully you guys are old enough to know who Kelly Garrell is out there, but make sure they're actual employees of that agency, because you want them to be accountable to a boss. Am I right, Luann?
Yes, yes, if, because those folks are then supervised by a nurse that comes in and does a regular assessment of the client. Whereas the registry, they are independent contractors, so each of those caregivers, it's as if they're their own boss.
Right.
The registry will tell you that they're fine and there's no problem there. But yes, my first choice always is an agency. I will tell you this, a lot of times families want to go with the private duty that Darby was just mentioning for the cost purposes. And I agree with you, Darby. The other good reason to hire an agency, and yes, the cost is greater because they have to pay themselves and they're paying the aid. But the good thing is there's always cover. If you have a good agency and somebody calls out on a Sunday night and this person has to have 24-hour care, you have an agency and they get that care in place. So
now, how
that's
much
that.
do you guys cost? How much is a certified care manager?
Care managers in our area, the range is from, and I just interesting you say that because I just was finding out this information, is $130 an hour to about $175. It may be higher, but I don't know any more than that. I know it's much higher in New York. I guess it's, cost of living across the country. And what does that boil down to? I get that question from families. Obviously, they want to know when they're signing an agreement or a contract. That when we first start with someone, it can be quite costly. It could be a couple $1,000s a month until we get them situated, until we get the crises are over. We've got people in place. For my company, I require at least 2 times a month a physical visit of my care manager to the client. Now, I do have a few people on 1 time a month because they've been with me a really long time. But our main reason, the reason I want that is because I want to do my best to prevent a crisis. And we're all clinical in nature, so we can go in and assess and see some changes that might be there, and then address those changes, hopefully before they're hospitalized.
Okay, I think we're down to legal at this point. That's great.
The only thing I just want to mention, advocacy is in here, but we do that every step of the way. It's very, very important to me when I go with a client to a doctor. I have real problem with when they look past the client and they talk to me. I don't, even if the person is confused, I want to see that they're giving that person attention. So that's just part of our advocacy, but it's, in the nursing home, in the hospital, it just goes right down the line. We are the advocate for that client in every circumstance that they come to or that they live in. Okay, and then legal, I'm going to leave that to you, Darby. That's yours. That's yours. I only make sure, I just will interject that I make sure the client knows about resources and make sure they have their documents done that we spoke of earlier, because a lot of times I get clients that don't even have those documents done. So.
Yeah, and that is critically important. In this state, if you don't have a power of attorney in place and someone becomes incapacitated, you're going to end up in a guardianship. And so it's very easy to avoid a guardianship if you simply have a really solid power of attorney in place. But if you do need legal assistance at that point, and you're trying to determine who to go to or how to find a good lawyer, there are some national organizations that you can go to start your search. And one of them is called the American College of Trust and Estates Council, ACTEC. It's going to be put in the chat here, so you'll have that resource. And those are some of the cream of the crop estate planning attorneys in the country. You also have across the country local estate planning councils, and that link or website will be put in the chat as well. Again, it's estate planning councils. Every community has one, or it can be a geographic area. And again, you're going to have some of your best estate planning attorneys involved in those councils. You also have the American American Council for Elder Law Attorneys, NAELA, National Association of Elder Law Attorneys. So if you think you may need an elder law attorney, there is a national association where you can find elder law attorneys. And when you drill it down, you also want to find certified attorneys. There could be certified elder law attorneys. There could be certified estate planning attorneys. I highly recommend that you limit your search and usage of attorneys that do exclusively estate planning. Because a lot of attorneys will say, oh yeah, I can do a will. Yeah, no problem. Or I can, everybody thinks they can do elder law or estate planning, but really estate planning can get complicated very quickly. And if your family or if you're the person you're caring for has some financial concerns, if we're starting to get, let's say below $300,000, you're going to want to look for a certified elder law attorney. Elder law attorneys traditionally specialize in what we call benefit planning. So they're going to be able to help you prepare for long-term care expenses down the road. If the family has more than that, I would highly recommend that you go to an estate planning attorney where they can look more broadly at some of the tax planning and some of the more generational planning issues that are going to arise. Because typically, traditionally, elder law is really focused on benefit planning. And again, I think we've got all the organizations in there somewhere. If you're looking for professional fiduciaries like myself, California has an association, Florida has one. I think I mentioned Arizona, I think has an association as well. I also want to mention one thing. I'm kind of out of the outline here, but when you mentioned earlier about a neurological assessment, in my experience, and again, everybody out there, that, as I say in every episode, it's just my personal experience and my personal opinion. When I am involved in a case, new to the situation, the person very often is showing signs of some cognitive decline. And depending on their age and depending on the extremeness of the decline, I'm not in favor of, oh, we got to go to a neurologist and get an assessment. We have to go to a neurologist. Well, in my experience, going to the neurologist really just ends up in a prescription for Aricept or Namenda or both. And in my experience, neither of those medications have really made a bit of difference. Depending on the age of the client, very often those kind of medications are really almost just making the family feel like they're doing something, I think. And sometimes the symptoms of those medications are more problematic than what the medications presumably are supposed to do, slow down the disease. Now, if I have a younger client with early onset, that's a very different story. But I'm talking 80, 90 years old or older. I don't know, in my opinion, the value of taking someone to a neurologist just to confirm what is obvious to everybody, that the person does have a form of dementia or Alzheimer's. Just my opinion. Luann, what are your thoughts on that?
I understand what you're saying. When somebody goes to a neurologist, it is kind of cookie cutter, but they typically want an MRI, and that I do like. If we don't know, if it's sudden onset, is there something going on? Is there a tumor? Is there a bleed? Is there something we're not knowing about? They also look at vitamin D levels, which is important. If their vitamin D level is low, their memory and so forth is cloudy. The other thing sometimes it's good for is they might say in their recommendation the person shouldn't be driving. Well, that's great to have that in writing, especially if you're trying to get the person to stop driving. I had a situation where I took a person to a memory center, and the neuropsych eval determined something that the person didn't tell me. They started to ask about sleep aids. So sleep aids have irreversible cognitive effects on people. She was taking 4 of them. We didn't even know that. So sometimes things come out of that. And then going to the Aricept or the Memantine or the Namenda, it's really hard to say if it's slowing or not slowing, because we don't know what it would be like without it. What I do know from all the medical professionals that I've talked to is once somebody starts on it, don't stop it. They said, I have a good friend who's a director of nursing. I have another good friend who's in internal medicine. He said, they've said if it gets stopped, they see behaviors, they see a rapid increase in cognitive decline. So if somebody does get started on it, don't stop it. But yeah, to your point, Darby, I think everything is different. Everyone's experience is different. And if it's a sudden change in cognition, I think absolutely a neurologist is in order. If you've seen a slow decline, and if it's not too taxing, and again, client-centered, depends on what the person wants. But if you don't mind, I saw the question earlier about the 8 areas. Somebody wanted me to just go through those titles quickly, if you don't mind. So it was, as whoever asked that question, I'm sorry, I didn't see your name, but it's health and disability, financial, housing, families, local resources, advocacy, legal, and the last one we didn't talk about again, but we talked about earlier is crisis intervention, like when somebody goes to the hospital and so forth.
Well, I'll tell you what, we only have a couple minutes left. And I just want to say real quickly, when Dad is kicking the caregivers out of the house, I have one quick story and Luann has another quick story. Luann, why don't you go first as how you trick people?
How do you trick people? That's a good way to put it. How do you trick people? But basically, typically care managers, we can develop rapport with people because we're trained as such. We have a lot of history. Typically, when somebody gets into this profession, they're already have been in the profession. I've been working with older people for 40 years now. So we know how to go in and talk to these people as a friend. And then once we develop rapport, then we can start to bring in other people. Now, doesn't mean everyone's going to have a care manager. So there's other options as well. So one of the really good ways is just to introduce that you're going to have a friend come over. I have this friend, and make sure the person's not in scrubs, doesn't have a name tag on. They're a friend coming to visit. So you sit down and you maybe do that with them for a little while. You have a friend visit, and then that friend turns into a caregiver. Another thing that older people are very accepting of is housekeepers and cooks, because they'll, especially housekeepers, a lot of them have had housekeepers. So the housekeeper's coming, but she's not really a housekeeper. She's a private aide. So she's walking around cleaning the home and eventually becomes friendly with the person and, oh, let me help you. And then they turn into a helper for them. Another big thing people don't want to do is spend their money, period, on anything that has to do with their care. I'm talking about the client themselves. They don't want to spend it. So a lot of times I will tell the person that this person, I don't want to pay for them. Well, you're not paying for them. They're a volunteer. That's not true, but the son is paying for them. But I'm not going to say that because they don't want to spend money. So I will just say my mom's 102. She didn't want caregivers in the home. And the way we got it going is that just what I talked about. A lady came in as a friend, one lady, and another lady came in as a housekeeper. And then they became full-on caregivers. And don't forget, people fall in love with their caregivers. Like literally, the caregiver loves them. They love their caregiver. They develop a tremendous bond. And that's what happened with one of them that took care of my mom. And they're besties now. So it's great.
And the other thing is that you have to embrace what I call therapeutic fibbing. Okay, sometimes there comes a point where you have to do that. Say this is the maid, or sometimes I'll say, oh no, it doesn't cost anything. It's covered by insurance. Don't worry about it. They can't handle at some point. They're not able to handle a logical conversation, but that they need the help. So at the end of the day, you're doing what's right for them to avoid their emotional upset and just say, yep, she's a volunteer or insurance covers it, not a problem. One of the situations I had was a gentleman he lived in a condominium complex. The HOA was trying to evict him. The neighbors hated him. He was obnoxious. He was mean. He'd scream and yell. And obviously he had cognitive issues, but he had no one, no family, no children, no anyone. I got involved. He would not let me in. He'd call the police. He'd threaten me. So I finally had a caregiver go over there every day, just knock on the door and say, hey, I just happen to be around. I brought you something, and leave something. Biscuits, fried chicken, flowers, a little bell, anything, just something every day. Oh, I just happened to be around. Just thought I'd drop this by. And eventually, of course, we made it in that door and we were able to give him the care get them the medications. Again, I'm not talking about neurology, but behavior medications, anxiety meds, because here in Florida, we have a very large population of what I call orphaned adults. And if you drive around, very often you're going to see a lot of homes with all the shades drawn, doors locked. And inside those homes and apartments are really elderly individuals who are just scared. They're afraid. And if we can crack that nut, if we can get in there and develop, like Luann said, some trust, a relationship, it brings a world of difference to that person. They will open up, they become the person that they used to be. And then they're going to grow older and pass happy and not afraid and feeling cared for. And if we can accomplish that, that's why we're here. That's why we're in this business. And so you as individuals out there who are family members who may be in this role one day, you've got support and you've got places to go to have resources and help to get you on track. So I'm sorry we kept it a little late. Michelle, I apologize. But thank you all for being here. Please, if you missed this episode or couldn't hear it all, it's on YouTube at Aging Academy. And Michelle, take it away.
Wow, this is great information. It doesn't surprise me in the least that we would go over the hour. In fact, we said this before we brought everyone in. There's a lot of information. There's, being a caregiver, there's a lot of different aspects that we're shouldering. And so I knew we would have a lot of information to go over. Big thanks, Darby and Luann. Thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom with us. And thanks to every one of you for joining us today. Now, if you didn't take notes, that's okay, because as I mentioned before, you're going to receive an email after today's session that is going to have links to all of those wonderful resources that Darby and Luann spoke about and that Chandra shared in the chat. We're also going to, in that email, have a survey. We'd love for you to let us know how we can make this even better. Did you enjoy this presentation? There's also an option for leaving a little comment. So if there are other issue areas that you would like Darby and our friends to cover in future episodes, let us know that too, because we have not built out the agenda for each of these sessions for the remainder of this year. We really want your help doing that. We want to make sure that we're sharing relevant information with our audiences. So feel free to share your feedback with us. And as a reminder, the Aging Academy series is hosted live on the third Thursday of each month. I'm going to put in the chat right now. I've got a link for both the events calendar where you can register for any of our future sessions. I think at this point, it only goes up to June, but we'll be adding more shortly. And if you missed past sessions, you can watch those again on the Aging Academy website. And let's see, I'm going to check my notes and see what we're covering next time. The next episode is going to be on June 20th. Consider joining us for more. Yes.
It's about
Darby?
being a power of attorney and being afraid of your siblings. Like, how do I do this? And how do I keep from being accused of stealing money? So we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, or if you know your sibling, if you're seeing signs that the person that you're caring for or a family member or friend is being financially exploited, some of those tips of what to look for, what are those red flags, and who do we go to for help? So please do join us next time. And thank you again for being with us this afternoon. We hope you enjoyed it and we look forward to seeing you next time.